747-400 captain and instructor pilot. Sadly, she's now flying Brand X. Here's Ann Simpson to tell us about a flight in the 747 from the pilot's perspective.
This really doesn't feel quite right. Generally, when I'm talking to a large group of people, I don't see them. I'm behind a closed, locked, bulletproof door. So if you don't mind, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Northwest Flight 19, nonstop service, Tokyo, Japan to New York City, JFK International Airport. Thanks to these gentlemen up here and many others, I started flying the 747 on not the newest, but the almost newest variety, the 747-400. And they had worked out most of the kinks. So many kinks that we didn't even have a flight engineer at that time. They perfected the airplane enough that most of the systems management was done by computers, and it did a very good job. We had to monitor and make sure the computers were doing the right thing, but we really didn't have to mess with temperature or fuel or anything like that. The airplane took care of it for us. So thank you, gentlemen. So what I thought I would like to do today is show you what it's like to be a bit of an average line pilot, and that's what I called myself. I didn't have to do the ferry flights. Occasionally, we would have a minor problem, and once a year, we would have lots of problems when we were in the simulator doing our check rides. But outside on the line, generally things were pretty smooth, and the airplanes were very reliable, the engines were very reliable. So please join me on a trip from Tokyo to New York City. This is the airplane that I flew that day, a beautiful Northwest Airlines jet, now painted in Delta colors because I'm now a Delta pilot. And the way we would start is the pilots would gather in a flight planning room, and we have a minimum of 25 feet of paper. If we have less than that, we probably can't go. And that paperwork would contain everything we need to know, hopefully, for the flight. The 4 pilots in this case, because it's a flight that's over 12 hours, would gather, and we all kind of have our own jobs, looking at what's important to our particular job. In this case, we will always have the flight routing, the weather at our destination, departure and alternate, as well as any NOTAMs or notices to airmen. And in this particular picture, you can see the blue book behind me. We had a maintenance item that was listed on the aircraft that was we were authorized to fly with. We can have lots of little things wrong with the airplane and still fly the trip because there's so much redundancy. And that usually takes about 45 minutes or so to do the paperwork. We make a call to dispatch to find out if there's been any additional changes that we should know about. And then the captains, there would be 2 captains on this flight, would sign the paperwork acknowledging that we had looked at the flight and we agreed with the dispatcher that it was good to go. Crew bus would take us out to the airport, and then we have a division of the workload out once we get on the aircraft. In this case, I was flying part of the first crew flying, the captain, and then there was another captain and a co-pilot that would be flying the second half of the flight. So I'm checking the logbook. This would have redundancy of what we'd seen in the paperwork and other items that had been previously reported as being a problem and then fixed. So if something happens, I can say, oh, that happened on the last flight. And I would also then program the flight plan. The other co-pilot is setting up the cockpit in certain ways. The flying co-pilot. The co-pilot not working goes out and does a visual inspection, walking around the aircraft, kicking the tires. And the additional captain usually is just helping where we need it and getting us coffee. In this picture, I'm taxiing out to the runway, and actually I think I'm getting lined up for takeoff. I'm actually not going to make this takeoff. We swap legs, the co-pilot and the captain change who gets to make the takeoff and the landing so that we all stay current and proficient. But I would be doing the taxiing on the aircraft, and as Jim said, it's a very easy airplane to taxi. Brand X is not quite so easy. And in just a moment, I'm going to be pushing up the power and we're going to be taking off. And Mike added a couple of cool pictures here. But the co-pilot will be doing it. There's a very structured change of command. And this always happens in every case. When I take my hand off the thrust lever and I'm giving the airplane to the co-pilot, I will say very clearly, you got the airplane, and he will respond with, I have the aircraft, or something similar, so it's very clear as to who's flying. And here we go, take off roll. Cool, huh? Now we're obviously off the ground, we're going to pull up the gear, and in the next picture, he is still flying and I'm the pilot not flying, which means my job includes talking on the radio, changing radio frequencies, changing routing if we need to do it, and the pilot flying is concentrating on the actual job of flying. So we take off and coast out over the Pacific, and in about 3 hours after the flight attendants have finished the first class service and everybody else is happy, we get dinner. And it's usually pretty good, white men in service. So this is about 3 hours into the flight. As I said, there's 2 crews, so the other 2 pilots have gone back to take their break. They will be coming up halfway along the trip. And in this time, it's usually not too much going on. We're talking on the radios and making position reports, monitoring fuel, monitoring the systems, and having dinner. After half of the flight, we give the crew that's in the bunk about a 20-minute call, and they come up to relieve us so that we can go on our break. And one of the very important things, once the crew who's been on break, one of the important things to do for them is brief them on what's been happening. Again, generally very routine. We have checklists for everything here. You can see I'm looking at the checklist. So before takeoff, after takeoff, we don't memorize this stuff. Most of us have it kind of memorized, but we don't memorize it intentionally. We want to make sure that it's very methodical going through a checklist. So I'm briefing the other captain on things like where are we, and just the general information that he needs to know. But then also if there's anything abnormal, do we have any maintenance issues? Do we have any sick passengers? With an airplane full of 400 passengers in the air for 14 hours, probably the most common problem we have is somebody getting sick. But on the other hand, having 400 passengers, we very often, and in my case, every time, have had at least one doctor or paramedic on board. It's a small town. So it's my turn to go on break, and right behind the cockpit, we have a bunk room, and there are 2 bunks here. Usually it works out pretty well. Nobody fights too much over who gets the top and who gets the bottom, but it does happen. And it's like a train bunk, I guess. There's a curtain that closes and light so that you can read. And because a lot of our flight crew now are mixed genders, there's a little protocol when you go back and how the next crew comes. It's a knock on the wall. I'm all in my bunk with the curtain closed. Generally, on these flights, you're going to have 4 or 5, maybe even 6 hours in the bunk. Personally, I would usually get a 2 or 3 hour pretty good sleep. The mattresses aren't the best. We like Tempur-Pedic, but nice paper sheets. But it's pretty comfortable. It's lie flat and put in your earplugs, and 45 minutes before, half an hour before top of the descent, they chime you, and it's time to go back to work. So like I said, about a little bit before top of the descent, rude awakening, you walk back in, and it's bright, bright light in the cockpit, rubbing your eyes. And then again, in the busy areas, we always had all 4 pilots on the flight deck. 4 sets of ears, 4 sets of eyes, and everybody paying attention to what's going on. So we're all there to catch each other in case we miss a radio frequency. Sometimes with the international flying, it's really hard to understand what they're saying, and you'll have somebody help you interpret what the accent was and figure out what it was that they want you to do. In this case, again, the co-pilot's flying. He's all lined up for the arrival into New York City. And as I recall, he did an excellent job, a greaser landing as we like to call it. Not done yet. We get on the ground and taxi into the gate. Sometimes the taxiing is the most challenging. Lots of aircraft moving around these airports. Lots of instructions from air traffic control. You know, biggest nightmare is ending nose to nose with another 747 on the taxiway. Let's back up. Once we get to the gate, there's some paperwork to be done. I'm filling out the logbook. I'll put in any discrepancies and the oil on board when we arrive. And then we go to the hotel and have a nice layover. The other thing I want to tell you a little bit about, for me, what the 747 has done is it showed me the world. It is just an amazing airplane, and you get to go all over. I mean, 15-hour flights, and you're in a whole different country. I've seen lots of things and lots of beautiful sights. Those of us who are lucky enough to be in the cockpit see many sunrises and sunsets that you never get tired of views like this. The northern lights, thunderstorms, as long as you're not going through them, they're quite beautiful. I had the opportunity a few years ago to do a round-the-world flight. I was like a kid Christmas Eve. I was so excited about doing this, and this is after 25 years of flying. And I got to spend the night in Dubai, and you know, another thing that I've been privileged to